Why was she the only one still standing when the others sat? The briefing table was crowded, the air thick with stale coffee and the hum of a projector. Maps glowed in red lines across the wall, but her eyes weren't on the screen. They were on the silence. No one asked her opinion. No one even looked her way. A female officer, outnumbered by voices sharper and louder, reduced to a shadow in her own uniform. She didn't protest. She didn't force words into the air. She only listened. And behind that quiet, something stirred, something none of them saw coming. She could already hear the whispers from the corners of the room, the doubts, the dismissals. She doesn't have the hours. She doesn't have the kill record. She doesn't belong here. But what they didn't know, what she hadn't told them, was that this mission wasn't just about orders. It was personal. Her father's name was on a wall thousands of miles away, etched into cold stone with 100 others who never made it home. She had been a child then, clutching her mother's hand, too young to understand what service meant, too young to understand why folded flags weighed heavier than any metal. Tonight, she understood. Tonight, she carried that weight herself. But as the commander's voice droned on, the plan unfolding in calculated lines and coordinates, she felt the same gnawing ache that always followed her into a mission. Would she finally prove herself, or disappear as quietly as her father once did? She stood alone, but what came next, no one expected. The night was black, not the kind of black painted by city lights, but a suffocating void, pressing down like the sky itself wanted to smother the earth. The team moved fast, shadows against shadows, rifles angled down, boots sinking into wet soil. She stayed at the rear, where no one noticed the tremor in her hands, where no one could hear her steady breaths disguising fear. The radio crackled in her ear, a clipped voice, strained but controlled. 2 minutes to contact. Her pulse quickened, not from fear of what was ahead, but of the secret she carried. They thought she was just another trigger on the line, disposable, replaceable, but her orders weren't theirs. Buried in the sealed envelope she had burned before stepping onto the transport, she carried something else. A name, a location, a task the others didn't need to know. She glanced at the man walking beside her. Ramirez, always quick with jokes during downtime, always masking his own nerves with laughter. But tonight he was quiet. She caught the way his jaw clenched every time thunder cracked in the distance. She wondered what ghosts followed him here. Everyone had them. She just couldn't share hers. When the signal came, a fist raised in the dark, the squad froze. Ahead, a faint light flickered through the trees. Their target. And yet for her, the mission didn't start with that light. It started with a memory, a promise, a face she hadn't seen in years, waiting at the center of this storm. The first shot wasn't hers. It ripped through the night, a muzzle flash tearing the darkness, followed by chaos. The squad scattered, gunfire crackling against branches, echoing in the hills. She pressed low, cheek to earth, the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding her tongue. Her rifle steadied. Her finger curled. One breath, two, and silence followed her shot. But silence never lasts. She rose, sweeping her eyes through the shadows, catching fragments of fear on every face. Ramirez shouted something, dragging a wounded soldier by the vest. Another cursed, firing blind into the tree line. It wasn't the chaos that unsettled her. It was the pattern. The enemy moved like they knew, like they had been waiting. That's when she felt it, the prickle along the back of her neck, the unshakable truth pressing in. Someone had leaked them. Someone wanted this squad to bleed. Her orders echoed in her skull, words burned into her memory from the letter she destroyed. Trust no one. Find him. End it. But who was him, and why did she still hesitate? What was she protecting, duty or memory? Hours later, the rain came down hard, soaking gear, blurring the world in streaks of silver. The squad huddled under a jagged outcrop, catching their breath, patching wounds. No one slept. No one spoke more than a word at a time, except Ramirez. He whispered, not jokes, not tonight, but stories. About his little girl back home, about the toy he carried in his pack for luck. His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. She listened, heart tightening. She envied him not for his family, but for the way he could still believe in light, even here. She wondered if her father had done the same once, if he had told stories to strangers before his silence became permanent. She caught herself staring at the photograph in her own pocket, edges frayed from years of folding. Her brother, younger, smiling. The last time she saw him, he was still whole. But the last call she had received was not from him. It was about him, wounded, missing, forgotten in the dust of a conflict no one at home wanted to talk about anymore. She clenched the photo. Maybe that was why she was here. Maybe the mission wasn't about the enemy at all. Maybe it was about finding pieces of him in the rubble, proving his sacrifice mattered. Or maybe she was just lying to herself to numb the truth. The betrayal revealed itself slowly. A footprint where it shouldn't be, a code word used out of place, a radio frequency that carried not just their voices but someone else. She pieced it together in silence, watching the men she had marched with, shared rations with, trusted with her life. It was Ramirez who caught her staring too long. His eyes narrowed, questions unspoken. And in that quiet exchange, she realized something she didn't want to face. Either she trusted him, or she trusted no one. But there was something he hadn't told her either. His hand lingered too long near his rifle. His eyes shifted when asked about the last transmission. She wanted to ask. She wanted to accuse. But the mission pushed forward, and with every step, her chest tightened with dread. She knew betrayal when she felt it. She had lived it before in smaller ways. Friends who faded when grief consumed her. Officers who looked past her in briefings. Family who never said her father's name out loud again. Betrayal wore many faces. But this one could get them all killed. How much can a soldier carry before breaking? The night stretched into endless silence. They reached the compound, broken walls, rusted gates, the stench of old fire hanging in the air. She led the way now, no one questioned it. No one dared. Her eyes swept windows, corners, shadows, her body moving like instinct had replaced flesh. Then it happened. A child stepped out, thin, barefoot, clutching something small in trembling hands. The squad froze. Ramirez whispered, "Mine." He lowered his rifle, moving forward. She reached out, a warning in her voice, but it was too late. The object fell from the child's hands, not a toy, not hope, a detonator. The explosion tore the ground, flinging bodies like rag dolls. The world spun, ears ringing, smoke choking the air. When she rose, staggering, blood dripping down her face, the first thing she saw was Ramirez, broken, barely breathing, his hand still clutching that little toy. Her chest cracked open with something she hadn't felt in years, raw grief. And with it, rage. She had a choice. Finish the mission as written, or finish it as she knew it should be. The letter's command echoed once more. Find him, end it. Through fire and ruin, she tracked the one pulling strings, the betrayer who had fed them to the wolves. And when she finally stood before him, weapon raised, the rain washing soot from her skin, she realized it wasn't justice she wanted. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. Her father, her brother, Ramirez, all the names carried in silence. None of them needed medals. None of them needed recognition. They just needed to be remembered, to not vanish into the endless list of the forgotten. She lowered the rifle. For the first time, her silence wasn't heavy, it was free. In the end, there were no speeches. No parades. No cameras waiting when she returned. Only quiet. The kind of quiet that follows storms, where the world feels heavy and new. She stood unshaken, though everything inside her had been broken and rebuilt. Her quiet strength proved what none of them had seen in the briefing room, in the firefight, in the betrayal. That duty isn't written in medals. It's written in the hearts that keep beating, even when they're shattered. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The screen fades to black. Only silence remains. She stood alone, but what came next, no one expected. The blackness pressed down on them like a weight. Not the kind of night softened by stars, but the suffocating kind where even breathing felt stolen. Their boots sank into wet earth with a rhythm too steady, too loud, as though the forest itself could hear them coming. Each step drew them closer to the unknown. She walked in the rear, keeping her head angled down just enough so no one could see her lips moving with every inhale, exhale. Controlled, disciplined. A ritual she had practiced since her first deployment, counting heartbeats until the fear dulled. But fear never disappeared. It just hid, waiting for cracks. Her earpiece hissed, the clipped voice of the squad leader. 2 minutes to contact. Stay tight, stay silent. Her body reacted before her mind did, her shoulders locking into place, hands adjusting the rifle strap, eyes darting through branches heavy with rain. She moved like everyone else. She blended, but beneath the rhythm of her steps there was a secret no one else carried. It had started before they lifted off. Back in the hangar, away from eyes and chatter, a sealed envelope had been pressed into her palm. No words, just the weight of it. She hadn't opened it until the plane's engines roared to life. Inside, one page, one name, one location. Trust no one. The paper curled into ash when she set it on fire with her lighter, but the words branded themselves inside her head. They thought she was here for the same mission, that she was another soldier in another fight, but her path cut sharper, closer, deeper. She wasn't hunting their target, she was hunting hers. Up ahead, Ramirez adjusted his pack. His silhouette looked broad even in the dark, shoulders carrying the kind of weight that wasn't just gear. He had always been the loudest voice in the room, joking until jaws ached from forced laughter. Tonight, his silence unsettled her more than the forest. She studied him, wondering what kind of ghosts could quiet a man like that. The hand signal came sudden. A raised fist. The squad froze. Instinct overruled thought. One knee down, rifles up, every breath pulled tight into lungs that refused to exhale. Ahead, faint light shimmered between tree trunks, flickering, uneven, like a candle struggling to survive wind. Their target. But for her, the mission didn't begin with that glow. It began years ago, when a folded flag was placed in her mother's trembling hands, when silence swallowed her family dinner table whole, when her younger brother promised he'd never leave her side, and then the military claimed him too. She blinked, the sting of rain sliding into her eyes. Not now, not here. The leader's voice was a whisper through static. On my mark, sweep left, keep low, move. They moved, shadows splitting into shadows, boots whispering over mud. Her heart should have pounded, but it didn't. It beat slow, methodical, almost frightening in its calm. That was the trick she learned. Fear wasn't the enemy. Silence was. Silence let the enemy hear your soul crack before the bullet did. She crept forward, rain dripping from her helmet, rifle pressed to her shoulder. The glow grew brighter. Shapes moved inside the hut ahead, shadows bending across broken walls. She listened for voices but only caught fragments, guttural syllables, quick exchanges. Then a hand touched her arm. Ramirez. His whisper ghosted against the rain. You hear that? She nodded, but she also heard something else. Not the enemy, not her squad. A faint, rhythmic pulse in the static of her earpiece. Too steady, too deliberate. A signal piggybacking on their channel. Her stomach turned cold. Someone was listening, someone new. The squad leader gestured again. 3 fingers, countdown. 3, 2, 1. They moved like lightning striking earth, boots pounding, rifles raised, shouts colliding with thunder. The first shot ripped through the air, not hers, but it didn't matter. The night exploded. She dropped low, cheek pressed against the ground, mud filling her nostrils, her rifle braced. Breath in, exhale, trigger pulled. One target down. Silence bloomed for half a second before the chaos swallowed it again. Gunfire stitched through branches overhead. Sparks flew as rounds chewed metal. Ramirez was shouting, dragging a man whose leg twisted wrong, blood dark against darker mud. Another soldier fired blindly, cursing, fear leaking from every syllable. She scanned, too organized, too coordinated. The enemy wasn't panicking. They were waiting, guiding, hurting them. Her chest tightened. This wasn't ambush by chance. This was betrayal. Her rifle steadied again. Breath in. Exhale. Another target fell, but it didn't soothe her. It didn't answer the echo in her skull who sold us out. Ramirez caught her gaze, shouting over the roar. "Cover me." She did, without hesitation, without question. But the doubt burned hotter with every shot she fired. Because if the betrayal was inside their own ranks, then she had just covered the wrong man. And she still hadn't told anyone about the name in the envelope. Not yet. The first shot wasn't hers. It split the night wide open, shattering the fragile calm with a burst of fire that felt louder than thunder. 1 second there was only the whisper of rain on leaves, the creak of boots in mud, the slow inhale of lungs straining to stay quiet. The next, the forest was alive with chaos. Bullets hissed and cracked. Sparks snapped off tree trunks as rounds tore through bark. The acrid smell of gunpowder stung her nose. Her heart should have been racing, her hands shaking. But no, she felt still, cold. Every nerve, every muscle trained for this moment, locking her body into an unnatural calm. She dropped flat into the mud. Cold earth slapped her cheek. Her rifle came up, scope pressed hard against her eye. Her field of vision narrowed. She found a shadow moving quick, muzzle flare flashing like a heartbeat. She exhaled slow, a breath slipping away into the storm. Her fingers squeezed. The recoil punched into her shoulder, grounding her. The target fell, a silhouette collapsing into the dark. For half a second there was silence. A strange, ringing silence, as if the world held its breath around her shot. But silence never lasts. Gunfire roared back harder, sharper. Voices shouted, orders drowned in static and panic. To her left, Ramirez dragged one of the younger soldiers by his vest, boots scraping, blood painting the mud behind them. Ahead, another man fired wildly, rounds scattering high into the tree line. His lips moved, but no words came, just fear. The squad was unraveling. She stayed low, her body steady even as chaos screamed around her. Every shot she fired was deliberate, every move measured. But her calm wasn't victory, it was survival. And even as her scope cleared another target, another threat, she felt it deep in her chest. This wasn't random. The enemy wasn't panicked. They weren't stumbling into the fight blind. Their fire was controlled, their movements precise. This was no ambush by chance. This was a trap. Her stomach turned cold. She swallowed against the taste of metal that filled her mouth. The realization pressed into her mind with the weight of truth she couldn't shake. Someone gave them away. She blinked rain from her eyes, sweeping her scope past friend and foe alike. The squad leader's face was hard, jaw clenched, barking into his mic. Ramirez's shoulders heaved, dragging the wounded into cover, mud streaked across his face. Another soldier, young, too young, reloaded with trembling hands, whispering something that might have been a prayer. All of them fighting, all of them exposed, and yet someone had known, someone had put them here. Her finger hesitated above the trigger. Not long, not enough to be noticed, just a heartbeat. But in that heartbeat she felt it, the envelope. The burned words still echoing in her mind. Trust no one, find him, end it. She exhaled, squeezed. Another shadow dropped. But questions gnawed at the edges of her focus. Was it one of them? Ramirez, with his nervous laughter and quiet eyes tonight. The leader, with his clipped orders that always came a fraction too late. Or was it higher than that, someone far from here, who had signed their names into the kill zone like they were nothing more than numbers on paper? The thought was poison, but she couldn't spit it out. Cover me, Ramirez's voice cracked through the storm. She turned, scope flashing to his position. He had the wounded slung over his back now, stumbling toward cover that wasn't much more than a fallen tree. Enemy fire chewed the ground around him, snapping mud into the air. Her rifle answered, one shot then another, Bodies dropped. The path opened for him. She didn't hesitate. She couldn't. But when his eyes flicked back, locking on hers for that split second, something inside her twisted. He looked at her as if she was the one anchor in the storm, as if she was the only one he trusted. And the thought came, unbidden, sharp as glass. What if he's the one who betrayed us? Her chest tightened. The doubt was a weight she couldn't shake. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Not here, not now. The firefight stretched on, minutes that felt like hours. The enemy pressed and retreated, always testing, never reckless. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. Her ears rang so hard she thought they'd never stop. But still she fired. Still she moved. Still she held her silence. At last the gunfire faltered. Not ended, not clean. Just slipped into distance, echoing across the hills, leaving behind smoke and ringing and the heavy stink of blood. Her body stayed crouched, rifle raised, every nerve straining for what came next. Then Ramirez was there, stumbling into cover beside her, his face streaked with blood not his own. His chest heaved, lungs clawing for air. His voice came rough, torn raw. "You good?" She nodded. She had to. But his eyes lingered too long, searching her face for something unspoken, something she couldn't name. Suspicion. Relief. Or was it the same doubt that haunted her? She didn't know, and that not knowing cut deeper than fear. The squad leader's voice broke the moment, hoarse but firm. "Regroup now, check ammo, check men, we move in 5. Orders snapped them back into rhythm. One by one they dragged the wounded, patched, bleeding arms, checked each other's eyes for shock. No one spoke more than a word or two. No one dared. She sat back against the tree, rifle across her lap, rain dripping from her helmet. Her breaths came steady, too steady, like her body had locked itself into survival mode and refused to let go. Around her the squad looked human again. Not shadows, not soldiers, just men too far from home, clutching photos in hidden pockets, carrying voices they'd never hear again. Ramirez's hand shook as he lit a cigarette, shielding the flame from the rain. Another soldier muttered about his wife's cooking, as if the words alone could keep him alive. For a moment she let herself see them that way, fragile, mortal. And the thought cut her deeper. If one of them had betrayed the squad, if one of them had sold her out, how much of them was still human? Her gaze dropped to the mud between her boots. Drops of rain turned the dirt into dark pools. She could see her reflection in them, fractured, broken by ripples. A soldier, a daughter, a sister, a liar. Because she hadn't told them. She hadn't told them about the envelope, about the name, about the order to trust no one. Not yet. And maybe she never would. Because the real danger wasn't out there, waiting in the trees. It was here. It was walking beside her. What was she protecting, duty or memory? The rain had found them hours ago. First a drizzle, soft as breath against the skin. Then heavier, thicker, until every drop felt like a nail hammering into their helmets, running in cold rivulets down the backs of their necks. It soaked their packs, their boots, their bodies, until even the strongest among them moved with a slow drag in their steps. They found cover under a jagged rock outcrop, a narrow overhang of stone that barely shielded them, but it was enough. For the first time since the firefight, they exhaled together. Steam rose from wet uniforms, fogging the air with heat that carried the scent of sweat, gun oil, and mud. She lowered herself against the stone, rifle across her knees, eyes on the tree line. The world beyond was a smear of shadows and dripping branches. Quiet, too quiet. Her ears still rang from gunfire, but beneath the ringing she swore she heard something else. The hum of static on the radio. The faint, deliberate rhythm of a signal that didn't belong. She didn't say it out loud, not yet. "Here," Ramirez muttered, breaking the silence. He pulled a small pouch from his pack and tossed it toward the soldier closest to her, a kid barely out of his teens. his eyes still carrying the kind of fear that lingers after seeing blood spill for the first time. The pouch landed in his lap with a wet slap. The boy blinked, unzipped it, and froze. Chocolate. Melted but still chocolate. His lips twitched, almost a smile, as if the taste of sweetness alone could transport him somewhere else. Somewhere safe. Ramirez leaned back against the rock, head tilted up, cigarette pinched between two fingers. The flame barely survived the rain as he lit it, shielding it with his palm. He inhaled, slow, and let the smoke trail out into the storm. "You know what my little girl asked me before I left," he said, voice low, almost lost under the hiss of rain. "She asked if the monsters out here were real." No one answered, no one had to. Ramirez tapped ash against the stone, eyes unfocused. "I told her no, told her the only monsters are the ones in stories." He paused, jaw tight, "but I don't think I believed it when I said it." The boy with the chocolate stared at him, wide-eyed, as though he wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck in his throat. She listened in silence. Her chest tightened. Ramirez wasn't supposed to do this, none of them were. You didn't bring family into the field. You didn't let your voice crack with the sound of home. It made you vulnerable. It made you human. And yet part of her envied him, that he could still hold light in his hands, even here. That he had a daughter waiting, a reason to keep crawling forward when the world pressed down with its full weight. Her own reason lived only in memory. She reached into her pocket, not for food, not for ammo, but for paper, edges frayed, colors faded. A photograph, her brother, smiling, younger than he should have been when the military called his name. She traced the outline with her thumb, the paper soft from years of folding and unfolding. The last time she saw him, he had teased her about her boots, said they were too big for her, that she walked like she was trying to prove something. She had laughed. It was the kind of laugh that carried no fear, no burden, no idea that it could be the last. Weeks later she got the call, not from him, about him, wounded, missing, the kind of missing that sounded permanent even if the word wasn't meant to be, and then silence. Silence that spread through her family like smoke after a fire. She clenched the photo in her fist. Maybe that was why she was here. Maybe this mission wasn't about targets and orders. Maybe it was about him, about finding pieces of him in the ruins, about making sure someone remembered he had been more than a casualty report. Or maybe she was lying to herself. Her throat tightened. Rain slid into her collar, cold against skin that already burned from exhaustion. She told herself it was just weather, just fatigue, but deep down she knew better. It was grief. Grief dressed as determination. The squad leader crouched near the edge of the outcrop, whispering into his mic, trying to pull fragments of intel from a channel that was already compromised. Every now and then, he swore under his breath. She wondered if he knew, if he felt the leak bleeding through their comms the way she did, or if he was too focused on the fight to notice the noose tightening around them. Her stomach twisted. Should she say something? Should she risk it? Her fingers brushed the edge of her pocket, remembering the envelope that had burned to ash. Trust no one. The words pulsed in her head like a wound that wouldn't close. If she spoke, and the traitor was among them, she'd be signing her own death sentence. If she stayed silent, she might be damning them all. The moral weight crushed her. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, a fragment from a bedtime long ago, before the uniform, before the silence. Courage isn't about being loud, kid. Sometimes it's about keeping your voice steady when the world wants it to break. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Instead, she listened. To the rain. To Ramirez's quiet hum, a tune without words. To the boy chewing his chocolate like it was the first meal he'd had in days. To the leader's frustrated whispers into dead static. The world slowed around her. She felt her heartbeat in her throat, each thud carrying the same question. What was she protecting, duty or memory? Thunder cracked, a distant sound at first, then closer. Not thunder, engines. Heavy, grinding engines rolling over the wet earth. The squad leader froze, head snapping up. His voice dropped, sharp, controlled. Positions now. The rest scrambled, rifles lifted, eyes wide with the kind of fear you only see when you know you're already behind. She stayed still for 1 second longer, staring at the photograph in her hand. Then she slipped it back into her pocket, fingers brushing the paper one last time. She rose, steady, rifle ready, rain dripping off the brim of her helmet. Whatever came next, she wasn't sure if she was fighting for orders anymore, or if she was fighting for ghosts. The ground trembled as the engines drew closer. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And in that silence, one thought carved itself deeper into her chest than in. The silence broke not with a gunshot, but with the growl of engines. They came like a storm creeping through the jungle, not rushed, not frantic, deliberate. Heavy tracks pressing into wet ground, snapping roots, cracking branches. Whoever they weren't worried about stealth. They wanted to be heard. They wanted fear to take root before their arrival. The squad stiffened, every movement slowed, deliberate, as if the air itself had thickened into syrup. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, feeling the rain-slick steel slide against her gloves. Her breath steadied. Inhale. Exhale. Her finger hovered over the trigger guard, but her mind was elsewhere. Trust no one. The words burned behind her eyes like tracer fire in the dark. The squad leader raised a clenched fist. A signal. They dropped lower into cover. The kid with the chocolate tried to swallow, but the sound was loud in the silence. Ramirez muttered a curse under his breath, flicking the last embers of his cigarette into the mud. And then voices, distant, foreign, carried by the wind through the dripping trees. The language was fractured, guttural, but she caught fragments, coordinates, directions, numbers. They weren't lost, they were guided. Her chest tightened. This wasn't chance. This was contact, this was betrayal. The squad leader hissed into his comms, whispering for HQ, but the line was already dead. Jammed. She could almost hear the hiss of interference pulsing like a heartbeat. Her instincts screamed. Whoever had leaked their position, they had done it well, too well. One of them. The thought coiled inside her like a snake. Which face? Ramirez with his soft hums and cigarettes. The boy, trembling, barely holding it together. The leader, steady but fraying at the edges. Or someone else, quieter, watching from the shadows. The voices grew louder. Boots in the mud now, not just engines. Shapes moved between trees, dark figures with rifles slung across their chests. Organized. Confident. She raised her scope just for a second. Through the rain-streaked lens, she counted them. 6. No, 8. More shadows trailing behind. Too many, way too many. Her breath slowed. She shifted to the boy's side. His hands shook as he clutched the chocolate wrapper, fingers trembling as if it were the only tether keeping him sane. She pressed a hand against his arm, steady, firm. He looked at her, eyes wide, and she gave the smallest nod. The kind of nod that said, "Not yet. Hold." The squad leader mouthed the same, "Hold." They waited. Rain pounded. Engines idled somewhere in the distance. The enemy's boots squelched in mud, closer, closer, until she could almost smell the oil on their weapons. And then silence. The figures stopped, just out of sight, just far enough that they couldn't see faces, but close enough that the tension pressed like a knife against their throats. She froze, every nerve on fire. A voice called out, not in their tongue. Slow, deliberate words spoken with confidence, amplified just enough to cut through the storm. She didn't understand all of it, but the tone was unmistakable. An offer. Surrender. The squad leader's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened around his rifle. He didn't answer. The voice called again, firmer this time. A laugh followed, cruel and certain. And then a new voice, closer, too close. Her stomach dropped. She knew that voice. Not by sound, but by rhythm, by the way it carried, by the familiarity it struck like a cold knife. Her eyes snapped toward the squad. Someone was missing. Her pulse hammered. She counted them, lips moving silently. Ramirez, the boy, the leader. One more crouched further back, but not all were here. The missing man was out there, speaking, laughing with the enemy. Her throat tightened. It was no longer a question, no longer suspicion. It was truth. One of their own had guided them into the jaws of this trap. The boy shifted, whispering, "Where is?" She cut him off with a glare. "Not now, not here." The squad leader looked at her. Just a flicker, but it was enough. He knew. He had counted too. The enemy's voice rose again, this time in their tongue. "Give her to us." Her heart stopped. Not them, not the squad, her. She felt the world tilt beneath her boots. The betrayal wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was specific. The enemy didn't just want bodies. They wanted her. Rain hammered against her helmet. The boy's breath quickened beside her. Ramirez muttered something low, too fast to catch. The leader stayed frozen, silent, his face carved in stone. Her mind raced. Why her? What did they know? Was it about the mission, about her family, about her brother? She wanted to ask. She wanted to demand answers, but there was no time. The squad leader finally spoke. His voice was sharp, clipped, cold. "Positions. If they move, we fire." The boy swallowed hard. Ramirez adjusted his grip, muttering a prayer under his breath. And she felt the photograph burning in her pocket, as if her brother himself were watching, asking the question she didn't want to answer. "Are you ready to die for this?" Her rifle steadied against her shoulder. She pressed her cheek to the wet steel, rain dripping into her eye. Through the scope, a shadow shifted between trees. A silhouette. The missing man, their traitor, stepping forward, rifle slung low, lips curled in a smile that no longer looked human. He raised his hand, signaling. The enemy moved with him, rifles snapping up like teeth in the dark. The silence broke. The jungle erupted in fire. The first burst of fire was blinding. Orange streaks carved through the night, tearing leaves from branches, chewing the jungle alive. The rain hissed against the sudden heat, steam rising where bullets kissed the wet earth. She pressed into the mud, cheeks scraping against cold grit, rifle locked to her shoulder. In the blur of chaos, she saw the traitor's hand flash, signaling, calling death upon them. Her finger tightened, but the shot never came. Not yet. Not through the smoke. Not with friend and foe dancing in the same shadows. Ramirez shouted, voice breaking as he pulled the boy down, shielding him with his own body. The squad leader's commands were swallowed by gunfire, every word shredded by the roar of engines and the shriek of bullets. And still the enemy pushed forward, not reckless, precise. They weren't here to overwhelm, they were here to dismantle, piece by piece. Her scope found a silhouette darting between trees. She exhaled, squeezed. A clean shot dropped the figure, body tumbling into the muck. Another shadow surged. Another exhale. Another shot. She carved brief silences out of the storm, moments where her squad could breathe. But silence never lasted. A grenade arced through the air, a dark shape spinning, slicing through rain. Instinct screamed. She grabbed the boy, yanked him down, pressed him flat against the earth. The blast shook the ground, dirt raining down in clumps, ears ringing with a high, merciless whine. Her vision blurred. Mud coated her lips, bitter, metallic with blood. She pushed herself up, body trembling. Ramirez was still alive, chest heaving, a curse rasped through clenched teeth. The leader limped, one leg dragging but still firing, still holding the line. And somewhere in the chaos, the traitor's voice cut through, shouting in the enemy's tongue, guiding them, directing fire like a conductor leading an orchestra of death. Her heart slammed against her ribs. It wasn't random. They weren't guessing. Every move the squad made was mirrored, countered, predicted. They weren't just fighting men. They were fighting betrayal itself. She ground her teeth, steadying her aim again. The traitor's silhouette flashed between trees, rain glistening on his helmet. Her finger hovered on the trigger, trembling. It would be so easy. One shot. one end to the whispers of doubt. But doubt lingered. What if she missed? What if someone else saw her hesitate? What if, in killing him, she proved the enemy right? A shot cracked past her ear, snapping bark from a tree inches from her head. She rolled, pressed deeper into cover, breath tearing through her lungs. The boy beside her whimpered, clutching at her sleeve. His lips moved silent words, not a prayer, not a curse, just a plea. "Don't leave." Her chest ached. She wouldn't, she couldn't. She pulled him closer, pressed the rifle back into his shaking hands, whispering low, "Breathe, focus, stay small." His eyes were wild, but something in her tone steadied him. He nodded, just once. Enough. She turned back, body moving on instinct. One target dropped, then another. The scope became her world, a tunnel of clarity amidst the madness. Each shot wasn't just survival, it was defiance. But numbers bled against them. For every enemy that fell, two more surged from the tree line. Boots splashed in mud. Engines roared closer. And always the traitor's voice, calling, cutting, guiding the fire straight into their veins. Her squad leader's voice tore through, ragged and raw. "Fall back, North Ridge." Her stomach dropped. North Ridge, exposed ground, a gamble, but staying meant certain death. She grabbed the boy, shoved him forward, Ramirez close behind. They moved low, weaving between trees, each breath a razor against her lungs. Bullets shredded bark, sliced leaves into ribbons, spat dirt against their faces. The ridge loomed ahead, a jagged climb of slick stone and tangled roots. Her boots slipped, knees slamming into rock, palms tearing against the climb. She shoved the boy upward, Ramirez pushing from below. But as she climbed, she felt it, eyes on her, watching, waiting. She turned, scope swinging back. And there, in the glow of muzzle flashes, the traitor stood tall, helmet tilted, a grin cutting across his face like a scar. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wanted her to see him, to know. Her chest tightened. Rage pulsed hot in her veins, but rage was a trap. Rage made you sloppy. Her father had told her once, long before the war, when teaching her to steady a rifle in a quiet field, "The moment you hate the target, you lose the shot." She steadied her breath. Her finger brushed the trigger. But before the shot could break, Ramirez's voice thundered. "Move, don't give him what he wants." She froze, just for a second, enough for the traitor to vanish back into the smoke. Her throat burned. Every instinct screamed to chase him, to end it now. But the squad leader's voice cut through, closer now, fierce despite the limp. "We don't die here, not tonight, get to cover." Her boots scraped rock, muscles screaming as she dragged herself and the boy up the ridge. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself tried to pull her back into the mud, into the fire. At the crest, she collapsed behind a boulder, chest heaving. The jungle below burned with muzzle flashes, smoke rising in twisted plumes. Shadows moved like phantoms, relentless. The enemy wouldn't stop. Ramirez stumbled up beside her, blood seeping from his arm, face pale. He dropped, gasping, cigarette long gone. The boy huddled close, clutching the photograph she had slipped him earlier, fingers trembling around its edges as if it were a lifeline. The squad leader hauled himself up last, his leg dragging, face carved with pain. He crouched low, voice ragged but unyielding. "They want her, that means she matters, that means we hold." His eyes locked on hers, heavy with unspoken weight. "This isn't just a fight anymore. This is about you. Whatever they think you are, we don't hand it over." Her throat closed. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything, the envelope, the warning, the secret she had buried. But the words caught, lodged deep. "Not yet, not here." The enemy surged again below, voices rising in unison, a chant carried by the storm. She steadied her rifle, rain dripping into her eyes, mud streaked across her cheek. Her chest ached, her arms shook, but her voice was steady when it finally came. "They don't get me, not tonight, not ever." And as the enemy closed in, their silhouettes multiplying against the flames of their own making. She whispered one last breath into the night, not for them, not for the squad, but for her brother watching from that folded photograph. "I'll finish this for both of us." The next shot cracked like thunder. The ridge became fire, and the night swallowed them whole. The ridge didn't save them, it only slowed the inevitable. Below, the jungle burned with muzzle flashes and smoke. Above, rain poured harder, carving rivers into the mud, washing blood into dark streams that trailed downhill. Her rifle was hot in her hands, metal steaming each time a raindrop hissed against its surface. She blinked through the scope. Shapes flickered below. Shadows climbing, relentless, pulled forward by the traitor's voice. He wasn't hiding anymore. He barked orders with confidence, his words slicing through gunfire like steel. Every command he gave was precise. Every shot from the enemy seemed to know exactly where they crouched. And she felt it. Not fear, not anymore. Something deeper. A hollow weight in her chest, a truth pressing closer with every bullet. This wasn't just war, this was personal. Ramirez cursed beside her, fumbling to tie fabric around his bleeding arm. His face was pale, lips cracked. The boy knelt lower, shoulders hunched, whispering fragments of prayer between clenched teeth. The squad leader leaned heavy against the rock, jaw clenched, his legs shaking each time he shifted. She scanned again. One shadow broke from the others, the traitor. He moved with arrogance now, head high, stride steady. He wanted them to see him, to know it was him pulling the strings. Her chest burned. She steadied her aim. One breath, one squeeze, it could end. But the leader's voice rasped. "Not yet. If you miss, it's over." She froze, his eyes, bloodshot and sharp, locked on hers. He didn't doubt her skill. He doubted the moment, doubted the storm, the rain, the distance. Doubt was contagious, and now it was in her veins. She exhaled, pulling back, lowering the rifle. For now. The enemy surged again. Muzzles flashed. Bullets carved sparks from stone. One cracked past her ear, burning hot, so close she felt the air peel against her skin. She ducked lower, heart pounding in her throat. The boy whimpered, clutching the photograph tighter. Not his, hers. The one of her brother. She hadn't noticed he still held it. His thumb rubbed across the worn crease as though the face in it was his guardian too. She pulled it back gently, tucking it into her pocket. His wide eyes followed the motion. She whispered, soft despite the storm. "He fought once like you. He was afraid too, but he didn't stop." The boy's lips trembled. Did he make it? Her throat closed. The question cut sharper than any bullet. She wanted to lie, to comfort, but her brother's silence weighed too heavy in her chest. "No," she whispered, "but he made it far enough to save someone else." The boy blinked, swallowing hard. His hand steadied slightly around his rifle. And in that moment, small, fleeting, she saw the purpose her brother had left behind. Another burst of fire chewed at their cover. Ramirez fired back blindly, gritting his teeth, breath rattling. The leader tried to rise, stumbled, slammed back against the rock. His face twisted, not in pain but in frustration. "They're bleeding us," he rasped. "Not rushing, not storming, just grinding us down." And he was right. Every second stretched them thinner, less ammo, more wounds, less hope. The traitor's voice carried again. Louder now, closer, taunting, calling her name this time. Her blood ran cold. He knew her name. Ramirez froze, eyes flicking toward her. The boy stiffened. The leader's jaw tightened. No one asked how. No one needed to. The truth was in the air, thick and undeniable. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. The enemy hadn't come for a squad. They had come for her. And now the squad knew it too. The leader's eyes drilled into hers. "What aren't you telling me?" Her lips parted. Words clawed at her throat, desperate to spill the envelope, the warning, the truth she had buried under silence. But the roar of gunfire drowned it all. The storm gave her cover for one more lie of omission. "Later," she breathed, "if we live." The leader's stare lingered, hard, unyielding, but he didn't press. He couldn't. The traitor shouted again, her name rolling from his tongue like a weapon. The enemy echoed it, chanting, voices rising against the storm. The boy clamped his hands over his ears, rocking slightly. Ramirez cursed louder, firing until the barrel steamed. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from rage, from violation. Her name, her identity, wasn't theirs to weaponize. She gritted her teeth, pressing her cheek to the rifle again. Her scope found him, the traitor, standing taller now, close enough she could see his face through the rain. Mud streaked across his cheek, eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. Memories clawed back the briefing table, his silence, the way he had watched her without speaking. The look that lingered too long, she had missed it, she had trusted. Her breath slowed, her finger curled. But then the boy's whisper. Don't hate him, just end it. The words shook her. How could a child, trembling with fear, see so clearly what she risked losing? Her brother's voice echoed inside her. The moment you hate the target, you lose the shot. She steadied, she exhaled. But before she could squeeze, the leader's hand clamped on her arm. Wait. Her eyes snapped to him, fury flared. Why? His face was pale, eyes sharp. Because killing him now doesn't break the line, it only makes him a martyr. She froze, the truth hit like cold steel. The enemy didn't just follow orders, they followed him. His voice, his betrayal. If she dropped him now, another would rise. But if she pulled him close, if she confronted him, stripped his power, maybe the line would break. It wasn't just about killing, it was about exposing. Her chest tightened, the harder choice always cut deeper. Ramirez's gun clicked empty. He threw the weapon down, fumbling for another mag. The boy's breathing was ragged. The leader sagged heavier against the rock, his leg useless. And below, the traitor raised his rifle, pointing it not at her, but at the boy. Her heart stopped. The chant fell silent, the world narrowed to one choice. Her scope aligned, her breath steadied, the boy's wide eyes reflected the storm. Her finger tightened. And for the first time, she didn't hesitate. The shot cracked like thunder. The traitor's smile faltered. His body staggered, rifle clattering into mud. He collapsed forward, face first into the earth he had chosen over them. The silence that followed was unnatural, heavy. The enemy froze, their chant broken, their guide fallen. Confusion rippled through their line like lightning splitting a tree. Ramirez gasped. The boy's mouth hung open. The leader stared, eyes unreadable. And she didn't feel victory. She felt empty. Because the shot hadn't just ended a life. It had ended a trust she once believed unbreakable. The enemy faltered, but they didn't flee. They regrouped, voices lower now, searching for direction. And in that fragile pause, the leader's voice rasped. We have one chance, move now. Her legs felt like lead. Her chest burned. But she pushed the boy forward, grabbed Ramirez's arm and dragged. The storm swallowed them, the ridge bleeding into shadows, the world narrowing to one truth. The fight wasn't over. But the traitor was gone. And yet, deep in her chest, a question festered like a wound that wouldn't close. Why had they wanted her? The answer hadn't died with him, it was still out there, waiting. And she knew, with a cold certainty, the next battle would not just demand her skill. It would demand her soul. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the earth still carried its weight. Mud clung to boots, to tires, to the air itself, thick with dampness and memory. The convoy moved in silence, engines humming low, headlights off. Only the stars bore witness. She sat in the back of the lead vehicle, rifle resting against her knee, eyes open but heavy, like someone caught between vigilance and exhaustion. No one spoke, not yet, not after what had happened in the compound. Her hands still carried the tremor, though she kept them folded tight. The weight of her actions pressed deeper than any wound. The target was gone. The man who had haunted their files, whose shadow had drawn blood across maps and headlines, slipped through in the chaos. He had been close, so close she could almost hear his breath in that narrow corridor. And then he was gone, swallowed into the labyrinth of night and ruin. She told herself it wasn't over, but the silence in the truck made it feel final. Why hadn't she pulled the trigger when she had the chance? That question cut through her louder than the distant thunder. Across from her, Sergeant Hale shifted, eyes catching hers for a second. He didn't need to speak. She could see it, his quiet blame, his exhaustion, his unspoken words. You hesitated. But they didn't know. None of them knew. There had been someone else, a girl, just a flicker in her scope. Bare feet, a flash of cloth, a pair of eyes wide with terror. In that instant she had chosen not to fire, not to take the risk, not to gamble a child's life for the mission. And because of it, the man was gone. The radio crackled. A low voice broke through. Command to Raven Team, confirm status. Hale leaned forward, pressed the handset. Extraction en route. Negative on primary. Repeat, negative on primary. The static swallowed the words. She closed her eyes. Negative, such a cold way to describe failure. The convoy rolled on. Hours stretched. The desert gave way to ridges, then to scrublands, until the lights of the forward outpost bled faintly against the horizon. But even safety didn't loosen the grip inside her chest. Back at the base, they dismounted in silence. The younger soldier, Ramirez, dropped his pack too hard, the thud echoing against the walls. He muttered something under his breath, something about wasted time. She didn't correct him. She didn't have the strength. In the debriefing room, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The commander listened with his jaw clenched, hands folded over a folder he never opened. When it was over, his voice was measured but sharp enough to cut. The world won't remember why you failed, only that you did. His eyes lingered on her longer than anyone else. She nodded, no defense, no excuses. She took the weight he placed upon her and added it to the burden she already carried. Later, alone in her bunk, she replayed it all. The girl's face, the man's shadow, the breath she hadn't taken before pulling the trigger. She wondered if she had betrayed her duty or honored something deeper. Was she meant to be a weapon or a shield? Sleep didn't come. Instead, memories crept in, her brother's laugh, the way he used to wave at her from the porch before deployment. His absence carved into her life by a roadside bomb years ago. She remembered her mother's silence at the funeral. Not a tear, not a word. Just silence, heavier than stone. That silence was why she had joined. To fill it, to fight it, to carry something forward. But tonight, she wondered if she had misunderstood. If strength was always about fighting, or sometimes about choosing not to. At dawn, she stepped outside. The desert stretched endless and indifferent. Soldiers moved about cleaning weapons, checking gear, brewing bitter coffee. Life went on as it always did, indifferent to victories and failures alike. Hale approached. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, "You saw something I didn't you?" She didn't answer at first. Then softly, "A child, I wouldn't." Hale's jaw worked. He nodded once, slow, like a man grappling with a truth that cut deeper than orders. "Then maybe you didn't fail." The words didn't free her, but they softened something. A thread pulled loose in the knot of guilt. Still, the mission wasn't over. The man was out there, alive, breathing, planning. Every hour bought him another chance to hurt someone else. She knew command would retask them, and she knew they would look at her differently now. But she also knew this. She hadn't lost herself in the dark. Not yet. That night, as the wind rose and carried sand against the walls of the outpost, she sat alone, rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. The others rested. She stayed awake. Because sometimes strength isn't the medal you pin to your chest. Sometimes it's the choice you carry in silence. And though she bore no ribbon, no praise, no victory tonight, she carried something far greater. The knowledge that in a world built on violence, she had not let it take her completely. The desert was quiet, the night heavy, but within her a resolve stirred, quiet, steady, unshaken. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in that silence, she prepared herself for what was still to come.